Hey, everybody. I'm back with Dom and Chris. And as promised, we have Jane Asher, part 2. And the part 1 is up on my channel. It's up on Dom and Chris's channel as well. And there's a lot of information that these guys have dug into. And I'm going to sit back like everybody else who's watching and take a listen and ask a couple of questions here and there. But Dom and Chris, I'll hand it over to you and take it away.
All right, then. There is a lot of information. And even this is just the sort of tip of the iceberg, it seems, that we've been talking. I mean, we've probably just had a 20-minute chat pre-recording about things that we're not even going to mention in here. And that could be a 2-hour podcast on its own. And you asked me a question at the beginning of the first podcast, why Jane Asher?
Yeah.
It was an interesting question, that. And Chris mentioned something right at the end of part 1 that I picked up on. And he said that it seemed to him that the Asher stroke Elliott bloodline looked like they were given a pivotal role in the control of the Beatles from the start. And I think that's what hooked me in, to be fair. Chris sort of hit the nail on the head.
I usually do.
Or hit me on the
head. No, to be fair, Mike.
It's interesting because Jane Asher is presented to us as just this pretty redheaded girl, and she dated Paul McCartney, and that's it. And they have that veneer, and very few people, in fact, I didn't do it either, decided to, let's take a look and see if there's anything behind that veneer. And that's what you guys did.
Yeah. It is. I mean, Jane is probably the focal point. I reckon they've put her there to keep you away from everything else that went on. That's what it seems to me. You know, put the pretty girl at the front. She's the focal point, and it sort of attracts the attention of anybody else that might want to look into it. But she's obviously not the only one. There's obviously Dr. Richard and Margaret and Peter Asher as well, who also play huge parts behind the scenes and probably still do, Peter especially, up to more or less the present day. I mean, we're going to see he became president of Sony when the purchase of the Beatles material from Michael Jackson was happening. That doesn't seem like some sort of accident, that.
No, it doesn't seem like an accident at all.
Given what we did in the first sort of part 1, and how it sort of segued into a lot of your work as well.
It would say to me that Peter is connected, and I guess we're going to go through that, right?
Yes, right, yeah. So as with all these things, the initial idea, starting off, let's have a look at Jane Asher's Bloodlines, kicked into a whole heap of other things as well. That there's a lot more moving parts that link this family back. And they flew under the radar for quite a long time as well. That's what I think, which smells even more of an operation because of that. I also want to say that a few people mentioned Annie Lennox in there, part of the bloodline of the Lennox dukedoms, and someone said, I knew she was a wrong un. I ain't saying all these people are bad people, by the way. I think some of these people have lived traumatic lives, lives that we wouldn't want to live anyway. And they're not necessarily all bad people. They're controlled, are these people, to do things that they wouldn't probably want to do if they had control of their own lives.
I agree. I get that a lot too. People like to generalize and say all of these people are bad people and they're up to no good. But the truth of the matter is, yes, there are people that are up to no good, but many of these people were born and bred into the system, and this is the only life that they know. And so they operate within this circle, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people. They're just, they're in that circle, and there are certain rules and expectations that they have to meet, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, I guess. But it's to generalize and say everybody is bad or everybody's up to no good or everybody's evil is not fair.
And go on, sorry, Chris.
No, I'm going to say it seems that they have there's a system, from what me and Dov looked into, they have a system that we don't understand really fully of how they operate. Like you said, if they're born into it from a child, they've got no choice, have they? And if they're put through trauma, it's not nice, is it? like I think I started off with the same mentality that they're all in it together, they're all nasty, evil devil worship. But it didn't seem that way. Some of them seem quite tortured, don't they?
Well, a good example would be in Memoirs. Billy talks about his earliest memory of being in a trauma-based mind control program was when he was 3 years old.
Yeah.
So if you're entering into these programs at 3 years old, you don't have a lot of control over your life. In fact, you have no control over your life. And so they become a product of this handling, this grooming, this training. And they don't know any better. So, and I'm not making excuses for them, but people have to take a step back and they have to think in those terms. It's like somebody who is raised in a household that's very dysfunctional. Maybe it's where the father is abusive to the mother and to the kids. That's the environment that they are acclimated to. So they assimilate that in. And even though they may be scared and know that certain things are wrong, there are certain attributes of that environment, having been exposed to it for a long time, that then become part of who you are.
Mm.
So that's how I look at it. And again, like with Billy entering into a mind control program or being put in one at the age of 3 years old, that wasn't his choice at 3 years old. My grandson is going to be 3 in August. He would have absolutely no idea of what was going on if he was put into a program like that and the whole process began. He would have no clue.
And how your grandson's going to be brought up, and how, say, people who we're talking about were brought up, is the flip of a coin like that. That is a totally different life. It's so far away that we can't even imagine what that type of
quite chilling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we got started, folks, Dom and I were talking about, he's going to show the clip of Dominic Cummings' father-in-law. And I'm not going to give the story away here, but or preempt the video. But what you're going to hear is exactly how these elites think. And it's a very, very impactful video. And I suggest that everybody listen to it. And when Dominic or Chris play it a couple of times and take it in and listen to the dialogue and listen to how he's explaining how this works, how these bloodlines and these families are connected, and why that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah. In fact, why don't we play that one now?
Sure.
Because I think now you've mentioned it, it'd be a good one to play. And I've got one of Sir Julian Huxley to play a few moments after that as well, just to get us in the mood of how they pick out these people from different walks of life who would match up with the bloodlines. It's very interesting to see their language, or hear their language. It is a little bit freaky as well, because you're actually seeing it live.
The quality is everything, but in general, to be elitist, I think the quality climbs up the tree of life, and therefore, in general, high things in the tree of life have quality and have skills, and they get wonderful degrees at university, and if they marry each other, that gets them better again.
So you wouldn't have minded if one of your children had met someone from a lower socio-economic group who was intelligent and talented?
Intelligence and talent is lovely, but I want parents and grandparents who've had hands-on success running their battles well and proving they're wonderful, because one is the subject of one's genes, and I think I like the idea of them being successful genes and winning through to successful puppies.
Some things haven't been in genes though, have they? Like, there's been some outstanding people and geniuses who've been like first generation.
No, they aren't. Very few first generation geniuses.
Very few, but there's still few.
Like which?
Would they have been allowed?
That's what I mean.
Of course there are.
You're saying very few.
Normally, you think of Bertrand Russell, for instance. Okay, ancient family, Dukes of Bedford, Wittgenstein, ancient family.
I'm surprised those ladies in that room, coming from the north of England, didn't actually give him a clip round the ear. That was Sir Humphrey Tyrrell Wakefield, for 2nd Baronet, explaining how they choose bloodlines. very crudely as well.
Yeah, he was very unabashedly explaining how it works. And he doesn't care if somebody is a bright young person and maybe they don't have a lineage that backs them up. They're not. What he's basically saying is they're not going to be given a shot. He doesn't care about that. He cares about keeping the system, keeping the bloodlines and the family connections in place. And that's what I got from it. And he talked about the tree of life, which to me goes back to the Kabbalah. That's just me. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. And he kept talking about successful genes. So that's eugenics.
Yes, yeah, it is eugenics, and he was. What I noticed with a lot of these people are that they've got fantastic debating skills. So no matter what question he was asked, he's got debating skills. We haven't got those debating skills because they go into debating rooms in these in Eton and places like that, and we can't debate with them because they just cut us off and make us look like fools.
Right. It's like when the guy asked him about the first generation genius, and he said to him, "Well, like who?" Well, he knows that he's not going to have somebody's name off the top of his head. So that's how he was able to box him in. But clearly, rationally, logically, there are people who are first generation, quote, geniuses. But that's how they circumvent the argument by throwing it back at the person who asked the question and asking them, well, tell me who this genius is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you said, Dom, they're very, very good at debating and deflecting.
Yes, yeah, and that is a skill in itself. It's like the legal system. They're like trained lawyers, aren't they?
Yes.
I had that. I was going to play that. I didn't know where I was going to play that because it was a last-minute insertion. However, what I was going to play is a video by Sir Julian Huxley going back to 1937, and Julian Huxley at the time was president of the British Eugenics Society, now called the Adelphi Genetics Forum, and this is how they pick their bloodlines, their agent Smiths, to carry out their bidding. And what he's talking about here are actors, not necessarily like pop stars, but actors of the day, the famous people, but people who build the sets for film and things like that as well. So this is a very interesting one. I generally play this at the beginning of presentation. It's about 3 minutes long, so it's quite a long one, but it does sum up how they choose generationally bloodlines.
What is the bearing of the laws of heredity upon human affairs? Eugenics provides the answer, so far as this is known. Eugenics seeks to apply the known laws of heredity so as to prevent the degeneration of the race and improve its inborn qualities.
Here is a man who, although normal, comes from a mentally defective family. Here is his wife, who is also normal. They have had 17 children. Let us examine the pedigree of these children. 5 of them died in infancy. 3 are still too young for an opinion to be formed of their mental state, a boy and 2 girls. Only 2 of the remaining children are normal, a man and a girl. The remaining 7 children are all mental defectives, marked on the pedigree in black. Of these, 2 live at home, a man and a crippled dwarf girl. There is 1 man in an institution and a woman with the mentality of a child. The other 3 are all girls and are all in an institution. How has this disastrous state of affairs come about? If we examine the pedigree of this family, we find that although the father and mother of the youngest generation are both normal, the father's brother was insane. Their mother was normal, but the father, the grandfather of the youngest generation, was defective, and his 2 brothers insane. Another famous family is that of the Terrys. All the individuals drawn in light colour on this pedigree possess exceptional talents for the stage, music and art. Dame Ellen Terry, the great actress, was one of the most outstanding members of this family. Here is her portrait as Lady Macbeth, which is now in the Tate Gallery. Beside it stands her daughter, Edith Craig, who is an actress and an expert in historical stage costume, and well known as a producer of stage plays and pageants. Her brother, Gordon Craig, is recognized both in England and abroad as a genius who has been a notable pioneer in modern stage design and lighting. His son, Edward Kerrick, is a stage designer and artist. Now let us see some of the other well-known members of this family. Ellen Terry's brother, Fred Terry, the famous actor, married Julia Nielsen, an actress and singer. Their daughter, Phyllis Nielsen Terry, is a distinguished actress with a beautiful singing voice. Her brother, the late Dennis Nielsen Terry, had a distinguished career in the theatre, and his daughter, Hazel, is now at the beginning of her career on the films. Ellen Terry's elder sister, Kate, was, before her marriage, an even more distinguished actress than Dame Ellen Terry. One of her daughters is Mabel Terry Lewis, the actress, and another daughter, Kate, married Frank Gilgood, a fine amateur pianist. Of their children, Val is dramatic producer at the BBC, and John is perhaps our leading romantic actor. And so, if we want to maintain the race at a high level, physically and mentally, everybody sound in body and mind should marry and have enough children to perpetuate their stock and carry on the race.
So Julian Huxley, what they're basically doing there is mapping out basically the famous actors of their day in the 1930s. So it is interesting going back in time and seeing in 1937 they were mapping out who was acting and all their siblings, if you like, and husbands and their families, and it's very interesting, I find. But then again, I'm boring, I suppose.
Well, no, he was laying out how they go about this. That's what he was doing. And but also what he was doing was he had this example of this one family that had, that had issues.
Yes.
Right? They had some problems with their children. And he was essentially using that and portraying that as that part of humanity outside of their inner circle, outside the pyramid.
Yes.
So he was painting everybody that way. That wasn't part of his inner circle, right? And then he goes on to point out, this particular family had this great singer, this great actress, and so on. But he never talks about the fact that there had to be people within these elitist families where there were mental health issues, or somebody was disabled.
More so than most people, because Sir Julian Huxley and his brother, I think it was called Trevelyan, were in the same asylum in the early 1910s. They both had mental health issues. And I think Aldous did. Certainly his father did, and his grandfather. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the way he put that whole argument together. The average person would probably look at that and say, "Oh, well, okay," but a little bit of scrutiny, and you can actually unravel that entire argument. Because if I was sitting there, I would say, "So, excuse me, are you saying that there's nobody in elitist families that has a mental health issue or has some other physical challenge?" No? Are you saying no? Of course, you can't say no. He could say, "Well, name one." Like Dominic Cummings' father-in-law, but
exactly, yeah.
You know what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, but they're going to find that because they're all inbred. So they're going to have problems. And not only are they all inbred, but they go out the way to be inbreed. I know we're sort of getting off track there from the Ashers, but bear in mind that Jane Asher follows the same bloodline back to King Edward III as the Huxley family.
Okay.
So there is an intrinsic link to those people, and she became an actress as well. And so did a brother, Peter Asher, and a sister. So, and there is a video. I didn't bother putting that in. I've put the audio version in, but Jane Asher was interviewed, and she can't remember, and we'll come to that, how she became an actress, which is rather interesting considering Paul McCartney, or whoever it was, couldn't remember writing Yesterday from the same household. But Sir Julian Huxley also founded UNESCO and the World Wildlife Fund. Foundation or whatever it is with Sir Prince Philip. So
but the thing is, Dom, he was explaining how the process works.
Yes.
In my mind, he was saying, well, you're great singers, you're actors and actresses and whoever, they come from this tree over here, these types of family trees, not that one over there.
Yeah, not that one. No, not that one. It is interesting. That's what starts me off, things like that. I find it very interesting. But anyway, we'll move on from that part because otherwise it'll keep us on. It'll keep us all day. You sent me this over because last time we were speaking about the Hamilton family, and the Hamiltons, obviously the bloodline that the lady on your show,
Stacey,
went back to, and these stories were out there years at the time when he actually was said to have died, weren't they? You're not making it up.
no. In fact, Paula's dead clues go back to 1966. I've got a couple of clips where it's talked about in some newspapers. They're very difficult to find, but I have a couple of them on my hard drive. This particular article was sent to me by a listener, and Stacey's work. In fact, I did part one, a follow-up to Stacey's first presentation yesterday.
Brilliant.
With Stacey. Yeah, we were on for 2.5 hours, and she's going to come back next Monday. We'll finish up, and she's got some very interesting information as well. I did tell her about your work, Dom and Chris, about the Ashers being related to Billy, and I guess we'll get to that in a moment. And she was pretty ecstatic about that. But this article was intriguing because, and you can see that, folks, that Dom has it highlighted. They're talking about the clues of Paul McCartney's death, and in that second paragraph, the replacement is one of two persons, either a William Campbell or a mysterious man named Hamilton. And in Stacey's work, she brought Billy's lineage back to the Douglas Hamiltons on his father's side and the Percys on his mother's side. And I think you're going to tell us about the Ashers and the Percys, right, Tom? I don't want to steal your thunder.
Well, no, we went into that last time. It was just in between that you sent me this document. Last time we mentioned that she was related directly to the Percy family.
Okay.
Via, I think it was the Earls of Northumberland or something like that.
Right.
Anyway.
And the Percy bloodline, there are Campbells.
Yes.
So this article was very, very interesting because this is the first one I've ever seen where it talks about the last name Hamilton. And I sent this to Stacey as well, and she loved it. But the clues are out there. That's the point. But back in the day when somebody read this, nobody knew Hamilton. No. Didn't mean anything to anybody. First of all, it didn't mean anything to most people because they didn't believe that Paul McCartney was replaced. That's number one. And even if you thought that and you were kind of looking into it, the name Hamilton probably didn't mean anything.
I found another picture, an interesting picture here, lookalikes. We mentioned the one bit with the Beatles haircut on the left-hand side, if you're looking at that. And this other one here on the right-hand side looks even more like him. And this was part of the Sinclair family, who we were talking about last time. And but he's certainly got a look of a Paul, one of the Pauls, anyway.
Yeah, the nose.
Yeah,
and the eyelids. Yeah, the eyelids as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I think that's John DeVere. Anyway, Bertrand Russell, interesting character. We'll move on. So Bertrand Russell. In this research, the Elliot family are also related to, they're actually cousins. Margaret Asher was a cousin of Bertrand Russell.
What a shock.
Yes, so Bertrand and Margaret are direct cousins. They share a common ancestor in Henry Augustus Dillon-Lee, a.k.a. the 13th Viscount Dillon of Costello-Gallin. He was Russell's great-grandfather and Margaret's great-great-grandfather. So Paul McCartney, apparently, whether he went and knocked on Bertrand Russell's door or Bertrand Russell was known to be a family friend of the Ashers, came to 57 Wimpole Street, and he was the one that introduced McCartney, whichever one it is, to the Vietnam War, who then introduced it to John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and the rest is history, so they say. But Bertrand Russell, as we know, he wasn't just the part of the Dukes of Bedford, as that Sir Humphrey Wakefield said. They were also the Dukes of Tavistock.
Is that right?
That's right, yes. And there's what the Tavistock word, the area comes up quite a lot in this presentation, quite by, I call it accident, but it's not really accident. And also, so does Woodstock, believe it or not. Which, yeah. And also, Bertrand Russell's son died at the Central Middlesex Hospital where Dr. Asher worked. Now, it was after Dr. Asher. You're talking in the 80s, I think it was, that he died. But it was at the same hospital that Asher did all his research. But anyway.
Well, the whole story, I'm reading the first paragraph there. It says, on June 18th, 1966, Paul McCartney celebrated his 24th birthday. On this day, he visited philosopher Bertrand Russell at his London home along with his partner Jane Asher. He visited again on June 20th. So this is, you just don't knock on Bertrand Russell's door.
No.
He was like an elite.
Yes.
And so there has to be some connection between Paul McCartney and Bertrand Russell for him to go, like I was saying before, how do you get past the iron gates and the moat, right?
That's correct, yeah. And the crocodiles, yeah.
Yeah. So the connection back to the Ashers makes perfect sense. That's how it happened. If indeed this happened.
Yeah.
And it's not just another story.
But the facts are that all these people coming together that are all related, like Chris said at the beginning, we talked about at the beginning, seem to be to put in place this control of the Beatles, who probably more so than a cultural revolution type, setting off a cultural revolution, they were probably the first band to be weaponized.
When you say weaponized, what do you mean?
But to change MK Ultra type weaponized to, as in they were controlled mentally, and
personally, okay.
Their music was weaponized to control other people, as we're going to come on to in a little while with Dr. Sargent's work.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go to. So the Russell family, just to finish off the Bertrand Russell, the Russell family are mentioned in Fritz Springmeier's Bloodlines of the Illuminati. There's an American side of the Russell family, just like there's an American side of the Elliot family, if you remember from last time. And they control. Well, not control. They're a big part of the political scene in America.
The Russell family?
The Russell family, yeah. I haven't brought any of that sort of information into here, but there's quite a big family in the Russell. Yeah, I think they were part of might be the Kennedy administration, one of them anyway. Tara Brown, you'll have heard of Tara Brown,
Yep.
obviously, Mike.
Yep.
The famous song "A Day in Their Life," and again, I'm not a Beatles fan, so the song, it's not that it means nothing to me. I've heard the song, but it's like I haven't got the same connection that you'd have with the song.
Well, people conflate Tara Brown and his car crash with Paul McCartney and his alleged car crash, which I don't believe Paul McCartney died in a car crash, but that's my personal opinion. So he was very much tied into the Beatles mythos, Tara Brown was. And a line in the song "A Day in a Life," John sings, he blew his mind out in a car.
Right.
He didn't notice that the lights had changed. So he's an interesting character. To be honest with you, I haven't spent a lot of time looking into him. I knew of the stories around him and the Beatles and Paul McCartney and the whole Paul is dead thing, but it just didn't resonate with me, so I didn't dig deep into Tara Brown.
Well, it might surprise you, Mike, but he was the younger son of the 4th Baron Oranmore and Brown. So he's I know you know he is, but he's I was being sarcastic then. He was also known as Lord Oranmore. So he's part of the Guinness family, obviously, as well, as you know.
Yeah.
But his mother was part of. Her mother was called Marie Clothild Russell, so it's part of the Russell family as well.
Okay.
All right.
No, I'm sure. I mean, I was sure that he had family connections, bloodlines, and all that stuff. My point, what I was saying was, I viewed him as almost like a distraction in the story. That's how I kind of viewed it. I could be wrong, but that's how I looked at it.
Well, the odds of him being a cousin of Jane Asher's would be pretty low on the radar, and he is actually a cousin of Jane Asher as well.
Yeah.
Or a cousin of the Elliot family, anyway. And they shared a common ancestor. That's their sort of charts together. So Tara Brown and Jane Asher, who I would have thought would be similar sort of. No, he would be a bit older than her. But they shared these two, John William Ponsonby, the 4th Earl of Bessborough, and Lady Marie Fane, and John Fane, the 10th Earl of Westmoreland, as well. So the great grandparents, they share, and there's some other ones as well. And as you can see, there are the Cumberland and Westmoreland Freemasons, and I would say that is like the Elliot Lodge and of what we were talking about before. They actually have their own Freemasonry as well, and a lot of them. William Ponsonby, the 2nd Earl of Bessborough, was the 2nd Grand Warden of the Grand Lodge of Ireland in 1731.
And what makes this interesting is there are people out there that are listening to this right now, I know, that are going to say, well, we could take everybody back to common ancestry. We can take them back to the primordial soup, right? And that's if you believe that's how evolution took place. I personally do not, but be that as it may. The point being here is that they have common ancestry, and they, as time went on, generations went on, they were also both connected into the Beatles. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is the probability of that happening? That's just a question I'm throwing out there.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, my thinking is that it's because it's all in the family, and it's very tightly knit, and it's kept so that they do take on roles in future generations towards some objective or some goal, some agenda.
Yeah.
And certain people in those bloodlines are picked to play those parts. So so I just want to throw that in there, because when I did the interview with Mark in particular, I had the people coming on and saying, oh, everybody goes back to a common ancestry and all this stuff. And they were completely missing the point.
Yes.
Completely missing the point. And so, but I'm not going to get into...
It's a very similar point, that, though, Mike. It's good you mentioned that. It's a very similar point to Dave McGowan's work when he mentioned about the military. Everyone said, oh, at that time, everyone was in the military. But they weren't all career military. Being involved in World War II because you were a conscript is a different, or Vietnam, is different to being a career military colonel or general or an intelligence asset. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if your father was a corporal or a sergeant in the Marine Corps or the Army, yeah, okay, fine. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about a higher echelon in the pyramid. And again, a lot of people just don't grasp, or
they want to argue against the obvious that's right in front of their eyes. And the obvious, because we don't want to feel like we're beneath anybody else psychologically. But it's not that we're beneath anybody else. It's that these people operate, like Chris said at the beginning, on a totally different level.
Right. Even in the United States, we have officers and we have non-commissioned. So if you have the officers club, well, I mean, if you're not an officer, you don't belong to the officers club in the military. And then once you start going up through the ranks, you start hitting colonel, general, 1-star general, 2, 3, 4. That's a whole different world. That's a whole different ball of wax than somebody's father my father was in the Marine Corps. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. But my father wasn't tied to any program. He was just I love Dad to death, but he was a
regular guy.
Guy in the Marine Corps who happened to achieve the rank of sergeant by the time he got out. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people that are involved in intelligence, in the military intelligence, uh, the colonels, the admirals, the generals, and so on. That, I mean, you don't get to those ranks on a lark.
No.
That's the other thing people have to keep in mind.
I traced Eminem's family tree back to Salem, right?
Yeah.
To a guy called Increase Mathers, interesting name, and he passed the law for the Salem witch trials. Now roll on to Eminem, and I don't know a lot of Eminem's music. He spoke about the trailer park that he lived on as Salem's Lot. Now, either he knows that his great-grandfather passed the law for the Salem witch trials to burn people at the stake, or it's a total coincidence. Well, it's not a coincidence, but some sort of synchronicity that he's calling the trailer park that he lived on Salem's Lot.
Right. It's not a coincidence. See, that's the thing, Dom and Chris, that so many people get caught up in. They think that everything's a coincidence. Now, I'm not saying everything is a conspiracy, but you have to think through this stuff. And once you understand how the world really works, where the world is controlled, it is managed, and it is controlled by elitist bloodlines, and it has been forever.
Mm.
That you can start to delineate between what is a coincidence versus what is a true conspiracy. And people throw the word conspiracy around like you're a freak if you talk about a conspiracy, but conspiracies exist everywhere. Now, I try to explain to people, if you work in a corporation, a large corporation, and there are executives upstairs who are planning on reducing your pay, reducing your benefits, reducing your bonuses, and looking to take people out of the business, downsizing. In my mind, they're conspiring. They're conspiring because that's not helpful to you. That's not going to benefit you. So this is going on and you don't even know it. So you have this control system above you that's making decisions that's going to affect you directly. But most people, rank and file, sitting at a corporate desk somewhere, are not thinking that way. They're not thinking that way. And I mean, I know it's the system worldwide is much larger and a lot more complex than that. But I use that example to try to get people to understand that there are things that you don't know about by people who are above you, who are making decisions that are going to affect your life.
Mm. And if you step a little bit further, these people that are managing this system that we live in probably don't run things. They're probably being forced to do something by other entities,
yes,
or whatever, other paradigms or that's controlling the thing that we're living through. But this can be seen because this guy here, for instance, the 4th Earl of Bessborough, was Jane's 3rd great-grandfather and Tara Brown's great-grandfather. And he was the Grand Lodge of Ireland. He was part of the, I forget what position, Senior Grand Warden of the Grand Lodge of Ireland. So it's been passed down through generations for these people to run these operations, or whatever you want to call it. And,
yes.
This is evidence. I mean, and people get mixed up with opinion and evidence, conjecture and reality. This is evidence. We're not making this up that they're related to these people. We can come up with our own theories as to why, but the two then marry up, don't they? That's what I'm trying to say.
They do, and the world is run like one giant corporation.
Yes. Yeah. So we mentioned the Fanes of Westmoreland, the 10th Earl of Westmoreland and Sarah Ann Child were grandfathers of Jane and George Orwell, Jane Asher and George Orwell. So,
okay.
I mean, these things make it England. If you add into the mix, Sir Julian and Aldous Huxley share the same bloodline. I'm sure a lot of people share the same bloodline, but they're not running the show, if you like, or managing the show like these people are, that are chosen to write important books or have their books published. and pushed out there into the mainstream.
That's right.
They're there for a reason, aren't they?
It goes back to the video you showed where Huxley was showing, well, this is how it works. You have good genes, and the people or the offspring and future generations, they're going to be groomed to be something important. Maybe it could be a politician, it could be an entertainer, it could be a celebrity, it could be a musician, it could be an artist, but it's going to be somebody that is part of the family, that to ensure that the agenda stays in place.
And Huxley taught Orwell for a short time at Eton. It does make you wonder, did they actually know that they're actual some distant relative, you know? I'm sure a lot of those at Eton and Oxford and where have you. But yeah, Aldous Huxley taught Orwell. All of these characters, because that's what they seem like, characters. One of their great-grandfathers was a guy called Fulk V, F-U-L-K, King of Jerusalem. It was buried in the Church of the Holy Church in Jerusalem in a monument cut out of stone and laid to rest there. I think he fell off his horse or something like that. And it dates back to the 4th century. Anyway, this tomb has got a black Maltese cross on it. So this is where it goes back to. But King Fulk V of Jerusalem's bloodline emanates from the House of Anjou, a bloodline that allegedly stemmed from Satan himself via his daughter. So now I know this could be mythology, but there is these people. It doesn't have to be real for these people to believe it either, does it? If that's part of their cult mechanism.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, it's not my big strong point, that, but it's more your world, that, Mike.
Well, it's their belief system. It's their philosophy. It's their ideology. It's their spirituality. So we have to understand that they have a completely different upbringing and educational system than we have. And if their family blood goes back to certain mythologies, then they embrace those mythologies. Whether something actually happened or not is irrelevant. It's an understanding of who they are from a bloodline and family perspective. So, I mean, that's how I look at it with regard to how they embrace their families.
Well, this satanic bloodline ran Britain for centuries. The Plantagenet bloodline, the House of Anjou. It was Melusine was the daughter of Satan, known as the Demon Countess of Anjou.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the dark side in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, they could very well believe this stuff too, Dom. I mean, they could actually believe it. It's difficult to tell. It really is. I've always said that mythology has always been presented to the profane as just storytelling, and I have said for the longest time that mythology has so much truth to it, but it's just disguised, if you will, in the mythology or in the story. But if you dig deeper, you'll see there are hidden messages, hidden clues. There are things going on behind the scenes from the perspective of these families that they believe, that they embrace, that is part of who they are. So I don't know if I'm making sense here.
No, yeah,
right. But to the average person, when you talk about like Horus, or you talk about Zeus, or you talk about, just pick a mythological character like Pan as an example. Now we can argue, did Pan really exist? Well, whether Pan existed or not, many of the elites subscribe to the the mythology of Pan and subscribe to what Pan represents. Pan represents just doing whatever it is that you want to do. If it feels good, do it. That's why we have the words pandemic, pandemonium. So as an example, Aleister Crowley was in the cult of Pan. Billy is in the cult of Pan. So I guess that's the best way to kind of explain it, is that we have these mythological characters, these mythological stories, but they are in essence a cult, and that cult is defined in a certain way, like what Pan is all about or what Dionysus is all about.
And you would say that cult is running whatever's happening in the world today. They've taken control over wherever centuries, because the destruction and how they run the world is, and it's getting to a point where you can see the collapse of the British Empire. I would call it an empire, or the Western way of life, isn't it?
Yes. Yep.
Which probably comes back to that ticker tape parade that you talk about with the Beatles. Probably it might be then where it ends. But I'm just going to change tact a little bit and talk about not necessarily Aldous Huxley, but some interesting thing that Aldous Huxley talked about, and then we'll get into Wimpole Street and Dr. William Sargent a little bit more. Aldous Huxley said there will be in the next generation or so a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but they will rather enjoy it. And some people, I found a website when we were doing Aldous Huxley research, actually said that Aldous Huxley possibly was one of the leading, was one of the leaders of Tavistock. I don't know if you've ever come across that, Mike.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, he was. And Edward Bernays was also tied into Tavistock. Also, Walter Lippmann, I think, was also tied into Tavistock. So, there's people out there that think Tavistock is just, that they're not social engineering, mind control HQ for the world. But I have news for you. You have to dig a little deeper and do some more research. So these people like Aldous Huxley and Edward Bernays, they just don't pop out of nowhere. No. That's the other thing people have to get their heads wrapped around. They just don't appear and start talking or writing books or whatnot, and making public appearances and writing white papers, and then people just stop and listen. No, I mean, the reason why they're doing what they're doing is because they have been selected to do that. That's their job.
Yeah.
Even George Orwell, I always looked at George Orwell. A lot of people like to put him up on a podium, but I look at George Orwell and I think to myself, he was responsible for predictive programming.
Yeah.
That's just me. I know there will be people who disagree, but I just thought to myself, well, how did this guy have the insight that he had back then about what was going to come? And that's because they plan decades and decades and decades ahead.
I'm not even sure he existed, Mike, to be honest.
Good point, Chris. Yeah.
There's only 3 photographs and no video footage of him.
Yeah.
And he's booked in every school in England. So you do have to ask questions about that.
Yeah.
I was thinking the other day that maybe 1984 is so terrible, so we can look at it and think, things aren't that bad. It's all right.
Yeah, it's not a bad point, that. And we did 6 hours presentations on George Orwell, and he was definitely part of the intelligence network. There's no doubt about that. He helped set up, and some of the Huxley family helped set up some of the intelligence network. His wife was working for the propaganda arm of the British government. His first wife, Eileen O'Shaughnessy, she was a psychologist as well, into child psychology. A lot of these people seem to marry psychologists. Aldous Huxley's second wife was a psychologist as well. Yeah. So I'm gonna. Why I want to play this is because it's a video of him talking about basically remote mind control, insertion of possessions while you're asleep, because William Sargent was doing the same thing, and it'll link nicely into the Beatles as well.
In your Brave New World Revisited, which was published about 2 years ago, you did claim that much of what you forecast had come true. I mean, for example, the use of drugs and this instance of people having their thoughts directed while they're asleep through music being played or messages being played through their pillows and so on. I mean, in which societies do you think that most of what you forecast has mostly come true? I mean, is it in America, Britain, Russia, China?
Well, it seems to me this is not so much, you can't say that it's a question of national peculiarities or even entirely of political peculiarities. I mean, I think when the technological and applied scientific means are developed, they just tend to be used. I mean, I think one can say that the whole history of recent times in relation to science and technology shows that if you plant the seed of applied science or technology, it proceeds to grow, and it grows according to the laws of its own being. And the laws of its being are not necessarily the same as the laws of our being. I mean, hence this sense which so many people have, and which I think one sees in so many societies, this sense that man is being subjected to his own inventions, that he is now the victim of his own technology and the victim of his own applied science instead of being in control of it.
How could he be in control of it?
Well, this is the problem. I mean, I think that this is perhaps one of the major problems of our time. How do we make use of this thing? I mean, after all, this was stated in the Gospel. Man, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And in the same way, technology was made for man and not man for technology. But unfortunately, the development of recent social and scientific history has created a world in which man seems to be made for technology rather than the other way round.
There you go. And the reason I played that, I had to play just the audio there, and I'll just put some images over it because it was the BBC wanted a copyright off it, but the audio they seem to be okay with for some reason. But anyway, there you go. You can't even play the videos now, Mike. You know, they want to lock the videos away.
If you noticed as well, Mike, he speaks. He's got a very similar accent to me and Dom.
Yeah. I think we went to the wrong Eton, Chris. Yeah. But anyway, so the reason I wanted to play that is for this. On the 10th of September in 1957, there's that date again. Dr. Ewan Cameron was in England, and he they arranged the meeting, a symposium with Dr. William Sargent, or Dr. William Sargent arranged it, at number 1 Wimpole Street at the Royal Society of Medicine, which is just a few doors down from where Dr. Richard Asher would have been. I find it difficult to believe that he wouldn't have actually been there, because he was in or around, he was helping write the Mental Health Act around that time. We mentioned it last time in part 1. And he was trained at the same hospitals where Dr. Sargent was. He was doing exactly the same work with his respectable hypnosis, etc. In fact, Dr. Sargent, it's noted that Dr. Sargent actually trained Ewan Cameron.
And Ewan Cameron was one evil dude.
That's been polite, Mike, I think. Yeah. It was said that in books that I've read that Sargent was ordered or whatever, recruited to run the British or set up the British arm of MK Ultra, which as I guess was for Tavistock. And he worked as well with Frank Olsen, believe it or not. So Frank Olsen was seconded over here for a couple of years, and he worked on and off with William Sargent.
Is that the same Frank Olsen that was involved in the LSD?
Yes.
And he magically or mysteriously was thrown off the balcony of a building.
Yeah. Well, Sergeant is actually linked with Olsen's apparent suicide.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah,
I just want to make sure I had the right Frank Olsen.
it's definitely the right Frank Olsen. Yeah.
Okay.
But so this symposium was held a few doors down again. We're talking of Wimpole Street here again, around the same time, and another coincidence. A lot of the characters playing out here, I mentioned last time in the first part, it looks like we're seeing the British arm of MK Ultra. I think we are actually seeing the British arm of MK Ultra.
Yeah, psychiatry was very, very important to these guys. Going back to the turn of the century in the early 1900s, we see it everywhere. You know, at one time, you guys know this, the field of psychiatry was considered to be quackery. And nobody took it seriously. So they had to work very hard in order to get it to a level where it was accepted from a mainstream perspective. But you know, we had Freud was the poster child for Tavistock, and his daughter also. Freud's daughter was involved with Tavistock.
And obviously, Bernays was married into the Freud family.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And we have John Rawlings Rees from Tavistock. I mean, you have all of these people that are heavily into this psychiatric stuff. And there's a reason for that. And they also were very keen on getting the pharmaceuticals.
I would also guess you've got the Rockefellers mixed into it somewhere as well.
Oh,
there,
yeah.
Because,
well, the Rockefellers were writing checks to Tavistock.
Yeah.
I was having that conversation today, actually. Isn't it funny? No matter how crazy the world gets, and then you end up going to see a psychiatrist, and then he convinces you that it's not the world, it's you that's the problem. If you take this barrel of drugs, you'll be fine. Right. You'll get used to the world, then you'll be all right. The world won't seem quite as crazy.
And that comes straight out of all the MK Ultra operation. Sergeant's work has links to not just Olsen's death after being given LSD or poisoned with it, but the Jonestown massacre in Guyana, the Kool-Aid night massacre, if you like, and experiments that were performed on human guinea pigs at Porton Down Research Centre, which is very similar to the Fort Detrick and all the other places that were running all the experiments in the US as well. But a chap wrote a book this year. Was again Matt Sergiu's. This is Matt's real angle of work, so I'm not going to cover it in Matt's detail. But this lady is a sort of semi-famous actress in the UK, and she was one of Sargent's victims, if you like. She was sent to these two hospitals here and ended up in the hospital for children and women aged 14. She's Celia Imrie, aka Celia Diana Saville Imrie. We'll come on to that in a minute. CBE. Film roles include she was in Bridget Jones as one of the famous films. She's the great-great-granddaughter of Sir John Ralph Blois, 8th Baronet, who is a direct ancestor of Sir George de Vere, which means she's a relative of Jane Asher, a distant cousin of Jane Asher. Celia is also an ancestor of William Russell, Lord Russell, who was the Member of Parliament for Tavistock. And you can't make if you wanted to write a script, Mike, you couldn't write this with all this information if you wanted to. So she's related to the Reverend John Lumley Saville, 7th Earl of Scarborough. Now, Jimmy Saville is rumoured. I've often thought round where we live there was a Lord Saville, and Lord Saville owned all the land, a lot of the land in Yorkshire, and this is the family Lumley Saville. And Jimmy Saville used to call his mother the Duchess. And a lot of people think that he was the love child of this family and his mother, obviously. And that's why he called her the Duchess. And that's why he rose up the ranks within society and he had a key to Buckingham Palace, etc.
But Jimmy Savile had to have connections. He would not have achieved what he achieved.
And the bloodline.
And the bloodline, yeah.
Now that, just before I get into this lady here, St. Thomas's Hospital, during 2020 when the British Arm area that the lockdowns began, Boris Johnson was taken to hospital, apparently with the dreaded lurgy. and he came out looking like he'd been electrocuted. His eyes looked like they were popping out of his head. I've got a picture of him. He looks terrified after he was. He would say he got better. Some would say he was released out of this hospital. But St Thomas's was where they had the ward where this lady was being electrocuted. And what William Sargent ran in the 1950s and the early 60s, she was 14 when she was sent there, by the way. They ran a ward called the Sleep Room. And he would put mainly women to sleep for 3 months, electrocute them, and, like Aldous Huxley said, play tape recordings of voices under the bed.
Wow, this was Ewan Cameron did the exact same thing.
Yes. Yeah. And she's living proof of that. She's given articles about being tortured in this torture room. And there's a book that was written called The Sleep Room, which I'd say to anybody to buy and have a read of, and it's a mainstream book as well. This guy's not really into the stuff that we're into. He don't link the two together, if you like. But yeah, he was running MI5, the British arm of the MK Ultra, and he just happens to be on Wimpole Street running the symposium, and at the same hospitals where Dr. Richard Asher was trained.
Yeah, that's a coincidence, Dom.
Yeah.
Just to say, Dom, that actress, I just looked. You'd recognise her when she's older. She's in quite a lot of British films and TV.
British
stuff.
She does look familiar.
Yeah, I just googled a picture of her. Now she's older. She's been in more stuff when she was older than she was when she was younger.
Is it Calendar Girl she was in or something like that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. She's in all those kind of things. Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. She seems to have done more stuff when she was older than younger, to be fair.
Yeah, well, the story is that she was a budding ballet dancer, so good that she went to the Royal School of Ballet, but they told her she was going to be too big.
Right.
So she became anorexic, and her parents, coming from an aristocratic bloodline, chucked her into one of these hospitals, these psychiatric wards.
Right.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Under this guy.
I mean, he didn't look sinister, did he?
Not in the slightest, no.
You know, just to explain to the audience a little bit, I'll pick on Ewan Cameron because I actually looked into him years ago, and he had this process called pattern repattern, and it was essentially just to completely rewire somebody's brain. It was a mind control program, and it involved sensory deprivation, electric shock treatment, drugs, hypnosis, emotional, physical, and mental trauma. So this stuff is very, very serious. And I'm only reason why I'm bringing it up is because I'm not sure a lot of people really understand when we talk about these mind control programs, and I'm not even doing it justice by just explaining the way I am. These programs are evil.
Yeah.
They're evil. And in fact, Ewan Cameron, things finally caught up to the Canadian government because that's where he operated. He operated out of Canada, and he was given all kinds of titles and stuff like that for his work in psychiatry. But I guess, I don't know how many years it goes back. I don't know, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. I don't know. I don't remember. But the Canadian government settled with people who were subjected to his work.
You would say it was well the Canadians, but it could possibly part of Operation Paperclip. It seemed to have happened around the same time. They've probably got information coming back from Germany on how to do this because the Germans didn't care who they were testing it all on. They didn't have to hide it from anybody.
Yeah, right.
Or the Russians and that. But I mean, Dr. Sargent's books. So that's The Sleep Room there by a guy called John Stock. That's been released this year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've got these two other books here as well. The Battle for the Mind, William Sargent. That was written, ironically, in 1957. Again, that number keeps popping back up again. This Mind Possessed was written in 1972. But in both books, they talk about using music to control the mind, using voodoo and Amazonian other Amazonian methods, drugs, to control the mind. And that picture there, I don't know if viewers can see it. I'll try and put a big picture of it on when I edit it. At the bottom, it says two words, Mike: beetle possession.
Yeah.
That's in that Mind Possessed book from 1972. So they were doing work on music controlling people. That is evidence of that what you've been speaking about for a decade or more, right? That the Beatles' music was there to control people is there. This guy were in the British arm of MK Ultra, and he's wrote Beatle Possession there.
Yeah, and at a very basic level, humans are very connected to music. If a song is 80 to 120 beats, that resonates with the human heartbeat in many cases. I mean, I can go on and on.
Mm.
So there is that connection, that natural connection that we have to music. So they went off, they know this, and they exploited the music for their purposes. That's why with the Beatle possession, that's why they called the Beatles' fame Beatlemania. It's a mania. So a mania is a psychiatric term. Beatlemania. They have known about music's impact on the human mind forever. And they know how to adjust it. They know what elicits a certain response, certain behavior. And the other thing is too, once they get people all lathered up, like the girl on the right there, they also know that humans are, they mirror, they copy. So if you're in a crowd, but most people, if they're in a crowd and the crowd starts behaving a certain way, people mimic that behavior and they react the same way. So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on about how they know how to manipulate. And I'm looking at the titles of the book, Dom. Battle for the Mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
it's a war, basically.
Who titles a book Battle for the Mind? Well, why are you battling for my mind? Because we want to control your mind. That's why. The Mind Possessed. That's the title of the other book. It's just crazy stuff. The Sleep Room.
Look who published that book as well. Great Pan, Battle for the Mind.
Who published it?
The Battle for the Mind was published by Great Pan.
Oh, Great Pan. Okay.
Jesus.
Okay. It's hard for me to see. Okay, I see it now.
Yeah. The Mind Possessed. Sargent wrote about cults and satanic rituals around the world, which was obviously used in his MK Ultra experimentation. I would have thought that would be the voices under the pillows or what have you.
I was actually going to say that, Dom. Do you think that the MK Ultra is just like a weaponized version of satanic mind control? You know, when you hear about satanic ritual abuse survivors, it sounds like the same thing, doesn't it? Just with a bit more technology involved. If you know what I mean.
They look to break down the mind to create altars. It's what was I going to say about Tavistock? We were talking about cults, and I've told my audience over and over again that Tavistock is good at a lot of stuff, but there's two things they really excel at. One is the creation of cults. So a cult could be it could be a very innocuous thing. It could be something that you don't give much thought to, but a band, like if you're heavily invested in a band, you follow that band, that's a cult. You're in a cult.
Yes.
Also, what Tavistock did, along with all of these guys, because they were all involved, is to take an adult and reduce their thinking, their critical thinking, down to that of a child. So, because the way a child reacts, it's many times it's from emotions. They get emotional about something, and that's how they respond to things emotionally. They're not responding to things logically or rationally. It's from an emotional perspective. And that's what we see taking place everywhere in the world, because everything is a cult. They've got people in these buckets, and each one of those buckets has, they have buttons that they push so that the people who are categorized and put in those buckets, they know how they're going to react and behave to whatever triggers they present to them. So, they're political people, like Trump is a cult, Biden was a cult, the Beatles were a cult, the Rolling Stones were a cult, Led Zeppelin is a cult, your Hollywood is a cult. There are all these cults, but people don't see it as a cult because they've they portray cults as some really weird, oddball, strange sect of people that are tucked away somewhere in the woods, and they all live in a log cabin somewhere. They don't look at it from the perspective of they have constructed a massive number of cults across the world, and this way they have people essentially categorized, and they know exactly what buttons to push, what triggers to present to get people to react and behave a certain way.
Well, that book there, the 1957, The Battle for the Mind.
Yeah.
I copied this. This is what was in it: about mind control, brainwashing, psychiatry, PTSD, LSD, sleep room, deep sleep treatment, torture experimentation, coma, National Health Service, the Tavistock Institute, Belmont Hospital, Portland Down, MI6, Ministry of Defence, the Allen Institute, where you and Cameron worked, and the Mystery Babylon, and MK Ultra, and the Unquiet Mind. I mean,
And that was in the Battle for the Mind?
That was in the 1957 book, Battle for the Mind.
So what were they explaining? They were explaining the process?
Yes. Yeah, they explained it. But in 1972, they were looking. He wrote about demonic possessions that can be used via voodoo. I mean, it's not a coincidence that people were out taking drugs. I mean, what they were doing were following. We've spoke about like the Maharishis and people like that, but they were also following these Amazonian type groups as well, weren't they? In the 1960s, that was that way of life, wasn't it? Well, that's what they were trying to represent, even though it didn't really represent that way of life.
Well, I've told my audience so many times, Dom and Chris, that the world is run by occultists. They're not run by presidents and prime ministers. Forget that stuff. That's puppet show stuff.
Yeah.
And organizations like Tavistock and other organizations, they are heavily occulted. So they have occult practices, and they will bring those, and they do bring those occult practices into their process. So when you talk about demonic possession and stuff like that, and Satanism, that stuff is real.
And if you think about that lady there that's in the 1960s with going mad for the Beatles with Beatlemania, if they're inputting things into the music to make people go like that, and then people are sampling that in 20 years' time, which people do sample 60s music a lot. I read an article the other day about the Verve sampling a Stones song on their, is it Unfinished Symphony? And they didn't earn any royalties from that. But that music is then transported into the 1990s, for instance, and then poisoning a whole new generation with the same music. It's fascinating.
Well, going back to Beatlemania, these girls, I mean, the stories are, have been told many times. The mania would be so severe that they would have orgasms and they would also piss themselves.
Wow. I mean, that is voodoo, isn't it? Because he talks in these books about these evangelists, when they all fall on the floor and what have you. That is what he's basically saying is we want a music industry or a film industry that makes you feel like this, so we can control you.
Yeah.
One interesting thing was Dr. Sargent, the Sergeant in the Sergeant Pepper album.
I don't know.
I don't either.
It's interesting you should say that because I was talking to Stacy yesterday, and she believes that it goes back to a band camp in Canada.
Right.
And there was a guy by the name of Pepper that was involved in that band camp. And Stacy was telling me, and I don't want to give Stacy's deal away here because I'm not done, but she was saying that she believed that band camp in Canada was used as a resource for grooming. So these young kids would go to band camp. So that's what most people think. Oh, it's just band camp. But no, it was much more than that. And one of the people that was involved in it was a guy with the last name of Pepper. And so, like I said, I don't want to give Stacy's deal away, but my point being is that who is Sergeant Pepper? Some people believe that it was Aleister Crowley, and I think because it goes back to the Devil's Pepper. You have the chart here, and Rosemary's Baby. I don't know. So it's still something that is an enigma
It's
and an
interesting, isn't it?
unsolved question.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Jane Asher also speaks of her family. People in her family, a cousin, was mentally ill, and so in a 2002 interview.
But that can't be. They don't have mentally ill people in there.
They're all fitting well. The chosen ones, yeah. But so Jane Asher wrote, when I was, this is in an interview, when I was 14 or so, I became aware that something was very wrong with a teenage cousin of mine. Although never let in fully on the secret, I picked up enough from my parents' muttered asides and whispers to know that the problem was far more interesting than a mere physical illness. My cousin had been hearing voices and had become extremely distressed and paranoid. He'd found personal and dreadful messages for him in the Bible and was clearly and typically, as I later discovered, in the throes of schizophrenia.
He could have been in a program.
It could have been in a program, yeah.
That was my initial thought.
Yeah. But one of the interesting parts is, and I've got an interview I'm going to play now with Jane Asher. We haven't got the video, it's just the audio. Is that she can't remember how she got into acting because her parents weren't involved in that side of it, in the acting side of it. So it's quite an interesting interview. I think you've already listened to it, Mike, haven't you?
Yes.
My guest now is a lady who's been called a competent and sometimes inspired actress, and the lady whose life is suitable for the subject of 1,000 short stories. Her name, Jane Asher. Jane, welcome to 655.
Thank you.
You've been in acting for a long, long time because your mother took you to an agent when you were only 6 years of age. Most mothers, of course, don't do that. Was your mother quite pushy?
No, she wasn't. It's always something that's puzzled me because neither of my parents were what you'd call theatrical parents as such, the types that you imagine to be pushing their children into that kind of thing. It's always difficult to look back and work out exactly what did go on. I think they had some friends who had children who'd done little bits in films and so on, who enjoyed it enormously, who said to my parents, oh, you should take those three along. You know, we all had red hair and looked sort of cute, I imagine. And they did, as rather a joke, I think. Never expected us to take it very seriously. And then we got odd parts in films and TV things and so on, and it just went on from there. But it is unlike them. I mean, it's something I've never quite worked out.
But having gone through it, is it something that you would encourage your own children to go into?
No, very much the opposite. I mean, obviously, if they decided to act later on in their lives, that's their decision. But certainly as children, I would hate them to do it.
Why?
Because although I think I and my brother and sister were lucky in that we escaped perhaps the worst of the pressures on children, I think a lot of the children I watched go through it did have a very tough time. The worst thing, I think, is to fail at such a young age. You used to see thousands of children queuing up at auditions and so on, and most of them, of course, would fail, and it's a rather hard lesson to learn so young, I think.
The spotlight was always on you throughout the 60s. Having been in show business since 6 years of age, did it help you then to cope with that sort of thing?
Possibly, although I think and it's very difficult if you're sort of 15, 16, and a press photographer says, you know, oh, hitch your skirt up a bit, cross your legs, Jane, you know, lean over. It takes a long time to learn to say no. I don't want to do that. And the pressures are enormous.
Long time to say no, 6-year-old.
Yeah.
That didn't sound right enjoyable. That didn't sound like someone who thought, oh, I love the fact that we're an actress. Ironically, we find that 3 kids did become actresses and actors.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, that her take was that she wouldn't subject her own children to the process. But she said that they did become...
Yes, yeah, we'll find that out later on. Yeah, some of them,
okay.
they did get involved in sort of like TV and what have you.
Okay, but it's interesting that her take was she didn't want them to engage in a process that she had gone through. That's what I was getting from it.
Yeah, I took that from it as well. I thought it was that she didn't want to go. She didn't want her children to go through. I mean, just to hint on that, hitch your skirt up and I'm 6-year-old or 9-year-old, and I've got to say no. I mean, that process there. I mean, what sort of photographer would tell a small child to? It reminds me of the Lewis Carroll thing, which we'll probably talk about in a bit. Where he was taking pictures of children. Again, we come back to that. What have they actually had to go through to live that type of life, to be chosen? It doesn't sound right nice and enjoyable.
No, it's wrong on so many levels.
I found this interesting as well. That there's and again, I'm not an expert on this angle, but there's a tribe of Asher. According to the Hebrew Bible, the tribe of Asher was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, descended from Asher, the 8th son of Jacob. It is one of the lost tribes. So that in the interesting part. The interesting part is that Jane Asher is known as the Queen of Cakes in Britain. So she, after her acting career, she became a TV sort of celebrity chef, a cook, but she was known as the Queen of Cakes. And the tribe of Asher from Genesis says, Asher food will be rich and he shall yield royal delicacies. So they became bakers. The tribe of Asher were bakers, basically, making delicacies for the king.
That's interesting. Now, I also have to say that their family going back to the Middle East and Israel doesn't surprise me either. Robert Sepper, I watched a video that he did going back, I guess about a year ago or so, and he had said that the royal family can draw their ancestry back to the house of David in Israel. So that says a lot right there as well. And that could very well explain, and I would argue that it does explain why there's so much focus and attention in that part of the world.
Yeah, I would as well. I know Chris has gone on about that for a while, hasn't he, Chris?
Yeah.
Have you heard the same thing, Chris? The royal families, their bloodlines going back to the house of David?
Yeah, and Vlad the Impaler, apparently. Prince Charles has said famously.
Okay.
It's good to know that our royal family is part of Dracula. And so we come on to Dr. Richard Asher. I have to thank a friend of mine, Lorraine. She did most of the work on this, a lot of the work on this. Sometimes you do need a bit of a hand, don't you, Mike? And
yes,
different eyes looking at different bits of information. But she managed to work him all the way back to Frankfurt in Germany, of all places.
Frankfurt is a hotbed.
Yeah. Part of the Holy Roman Empire, which I'm sure doesn't mean much, but there you go. I'm being sarcastic again. So it's the German state of Hesse or Hessen in Germany. Its capital is Wiesbaden, which is the largest urban area. The largest urban area is Frankfurt, and it's also the country's financial centre.
Well, the Rothschilds come from Frankfurt as well.
Yes. Yep. Interestingly, and I don't know if you want to include this part, Mike, but I've just written it in my upcoming book of next year. There's the name Stern, which is, as you'll see there, his mother's name was Stern. That's where the link back to Germany comes from. And Stern is part of the Frankfurt. It's a Frankfurt name, and it is a Jewish name.
Yes.
So, and yeah, look, Jewish people. I've got no religion in this fight, to be honest with you, and I'm sure the Jewish people have been used more than any other, as much as any other people as well. It's not the Jewish people per se, is it? It's a ruling elite again that we're talking about that are controlling them and using them probably to hide behind. But yeah, so the Rothschilds, even the Rockefellers came from Frankfurt originally. There's an area called Rockenfeld. Ironically,
that I didn't know.
Yeah, a couple of interesting books that I've got here. One of them called Americans of Jewish Descent, and it's more of a dossier written by Malcolm H. Stern. Only 550 books. I'm sorry, I haven't got this book, but only 550 books were printed of this, and they were given to individuals around America, and it basically told them which families to deal with, who were what they classed as Marranos, which those were Jewish people who pretend to be Christians in their community, but hold secret like faith to Judaism. And Stephen Birmingham, who's an author, and I've got these books, The Grandees, America's Shepardic Elite, and he says, who would expect to find the Rockefellers in that book? Yeah, so these people are Jewish people that are writing these books as well. The rabbis, they're not. I'm not quoting work from someone who doesn't like Jewish people. These are people who are they're from their world. There's a fantastic work. I found this work. It's called the Jews of Frankfurt DNA Project. All Jewish professors, and they've traced names back to Frankfurt: Bacharach, Dreyfus, Epstein, Goldsmith, Guggenheim, Oppenheimer, Schwab, Shapiro, Wertenmeyer, Rothschild, and many more. And they also include Stern in that as well.
Yeah. So, and we have the Frankfurt School.
Yes.
And the Frankfurt School was comprised of Jewish intelligentsia. They were Marxists. So, like I said, Germany and Frankfurt is a hotbed. And also, the Beatles did all that playing in Hamburg before they, the switch was thrown. And Hamburg is only a 6-hour drive from Frankfurt. And Hamburg is considered to be a major media hub in Germany. So that's why the Beatles were there. And I don't think it's any coincidence that its proximity to the Frankfurt School and everything else that went on in Frankfurt.
No. Ironically, Dr. Richard Asher's younger brother, Thomas George Horsey Asher, married Margaret Elliott's sister. So the family were intermarried, if you like, with so Jane Asher's cousins were double cousins, a bit like the Bernays family with the Freuds, and he died young as well. He was possibly a schoolmaster at possibly Harrow School because all his children went there. And he died on the 6th of December, 1966, did Thomas, about 2.5 years before Richard Asher was found dead in his basement. I found no cause. We couldn't find any cause of death for Thomas Asher. It seemed like a sudden thing. So possibly, maybe he found out about this type of thing. I don't know what was going on at 57 Wimpole Street. Maybe he was part of it in some way. I don't know that. But so this chap here, he is Richard Asher's maternal uncle. This was the gem. He was a world famous cellist, English cellist of his day. So he was a pop star in his day. He was called Leopold Lawrence Stern. James' paternal great uncle. He was a violinist and a cellist, and he played for many famous people. He played for the Astor family. He played for the Vanderbilts in America. He also played for President William McKinley at the White House. He was also a favourite of Queen Victoria's. He also played at the court of German Kaiser Wilhelm II.
Okay,
just
so
a coincidence.
I'm going to say coincidence, a well-connected coincidence.
Yeah, it is interesting when you find these little gems, though, Mike. I know you'll have come across them in your times of research as well. When you're looking into the Beatles and stuff like that, you find stuff and it makes your skin sort of your hair stand on end, doesn't it?
It has to make you wonder, doesn't it, if they were just doing the same kind of thing back then with this character.
It could have been.
Do you know what I mean? Was he?
Was he chosen
like a Paul McCartney of the day?
well, he studied at the Royal Academy of Music, which is a similar sort of place to where Margaret Asher was a professor at. And yeah, she studied at the Guildhall School of Music. And he, hang on a minute. Let me move to another picture here. So that's him there. He died young as well, this guy. They don't seem to last right long, some of these people. He died at the age of, in his 40s, I think. But he married this lady here, Suzanne Adams. And he was married twice. And he married another famous child protege violinist, Nettie Carpenter. And they divorced, and his second wife was this lady, Suzanne Burt Adams, famous opera singer. And she was also one of Queen Victoria's favourites. But she was married into the Adams family.
She also has her hands crossed. She's doing the Osiris Risen symbolism.
Yeah.
Is it me, or does she look a bit geezery on the right?
Yeah. A bit Yoko Ono. Same sort of haircut. But she was part of the Adams family. Were a well-connected, weren't just like the Munsters. They were a well-connected family. So, I mean, they were part of the Mayflower, but they were related to the Baldwin family, which obviously they were the Taft family, the Spencer family of the UK, the Quincy family. They were related to the Bush, the Roosevelts, and the Harrison families.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and she's got royal genealogy as well. I traced her royal genealogy back to. I mean, they didn't have any children, but they're still marrying into these families, still keeping it within the family. Anyway, he died here at the Bethnal House Asylum, did Leo, 1904, aged just 42. It was the largest asylum in England.
So he had mental health issues too?
Yes, he had mental health issues too. Stern's death certificate states general paralysis, common term for the final stages of syphilis. Doesn't seem to end well for a lot of these people, does it?
No. I'm just going back to the presentation that was shown at the beginning, and then pointing out an elitist family does all this, and we don't have any of those issues, you know.
No. And they're all dropping like flies.
Yeah.
So Peter, Jane, and Claire Asher. This is them as kids.
Yeah.
So that's when she was talking about her mother putting them forward to some sort of talent scout or whatever. They were only young there. I mean, how young were they? 4-year-old, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically selling your kids there, right?
Yeah, to get them started like that.
Yeah, she was 8 years old, began working as a child actor and appeared in The Planter's Wife and the stage play Isn't Life Wonderful. Anyway, she also played films in 1953. So she was quite he was quite famous. Sorry, Peter was playing these roles, and he played a role produced by Douglas Fairbanks Jr., who was also, I found this interesting, part of the intelligence operations in World War II. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. All these bloody actors, all part. And this goes back to what we were talking about a bit ago with Dave McGowan's work, where people were saying, oh, yeah, but everybody were in the military in World War. Yeah, but they weren't all high up in the intelligence services.
Well, he was assigned as a United States liaison officer to the British Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten.
Yeah, well, we know who Louis Mountbatten was, don't we? He was another Jimmy Savile friend. Right.
My point being is he got assigned.
Yes.
Come on.
and look, he specialised in deception and psychological warfare.
See, folks, when we talk about these connections, this is what we're talking about.
Included an undertaking training at the HMS Tormentor.
So please, when the comment section is going to be open, please think through your comment before you type it out.
Yeah. So Peter Asher was part of Peter and Gordon, as you know, Mike. I mean, were all new to me when I started looking at this, and a lot of these songs were written by Paul McCartney, whilst possibly still at Wimpole Street, and given to Peter Asher and Gordon to make hits to become famous.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen. They possibly didn't have the looks for it.
Another story.
Possibly went wrong because of the inbreeding. But we're interested in when Wendy Asher, or Wendy Worth, his wife became a well-known art collector, and that featured Banksy documentary, and or she featured in, which was released by Revolver Entertainment.
Revolver Entertainment?
Yeah, I've never heard of them, but it's all another link back to the Beatles, I suppose. But a lot of them have these jobs, like when Sir Julian Huxley was talking earlier, jobs that you don't really recognise, like a set designer or something like that. Like she's a art collector. I remember seeing, what they call him from the Police, the drummer, Stuart Copeland. His father obviously was a CIA agent, but his mother was a British intelligence officer as well. She worked for the SOE behind enemy lines in World War II. And then she became an archaeologist after World War II. And obviously just gave it all up. I mean, they get those type of jobs, don't they, sort of behind the scenes that nobody actually sees.
Right. And if she's an archaeologist, she was probably aligned with some, I'm just going to take a guess, we can look it up, some major university.
Yeah, probably the Natural History Museum or something like that. Something like that. Peter Asher subsequently became the A&R man for Apple Records. So there's that. What Chris was saying, that they're involved in intrinsic links back into the Beatles.
Yeah. This is what I was talking about with Tara Brown too. I mean, it just kind of converges at the top, and it points back to the Beatles.
Yeah. And then he went on to be senior vice president of Sony Music, as I mentioned before, when the Beatles back catalogue, or the catalogue of the Beatles, was owned by Michael Jackson, and Sony bought it off him, or half of it off him.
That was strange that Michael Jackson owned the Beatles rights, wasn't it? Anyway,
yeah. Well, that got me when I saw an article that said Michael Jackson also bought Eminem's music.
Right.
So I did Michael Jackson's genealogy, and it showed that he was actually more white than black.
Well, he was.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson. Well, people say Michael Jackson was swapped out.
Yeah, well, no doubt, it probably might have been, but the actual, whatever the genealogy was of this person was white.
Okay.
But mainly white. It was only till the last 2 or 3 generations became, so if it was the same person, a full black person.
Yeah.
So this is his daughter, Peter Asher's daughter. She was in Cobra Starship. Never heard of it. But a lot of these people, again, carry on the mantra in the pop world. People have to look into that. I've never come across them, but they were around in 2005-ish.
You know what I find, that a lot of the children of these high focused types of artists is that they don't quite achieve the status that their parents do. And, you know, my wife and I were having this discussion the other day. So as an example, if we look at the Beatles kids, we look at Julian Lennon, Sean Lennon, Donnie Harrison, James McCartney, they have never achieved what their fathers achieved. And my wife and I were talking about it, trying to figure out, you know, why would that be? We were speculating. And I said, it's because I think that they're, in the case, let's just say, of Paul McCartney or John Lennon, that their profile is still of the utmost importance to keep that intact because of what's associated with that. It's the whole cult thing that's associated with the Beatles, especially with McCartney and Lennon. And so they don't want that high profile aspect of it to be usurped by anybody else, and that would include their children. I was just a thought that I have, because it's kind of interesting.
We get the attention over kind of thing.
Yeah. They don't want to. They need to keep it where they have worked to keep it for so long. So we're just going to keep it right there. Anyway, so I digress.
It might also be that, going back to the bloodlines as well, that for some reason it's something within that genetic makeup that they don't have, as in, you know what I mean? Because they don't have the right. But anyway, it could be both. Who knows? But yeah, it is. I noticed Boris Johnson's, one of his children, became a singer, and she never. You'd think with all the clout that they had and all the connections that they could make it happen, and it doesn't.
Yeah, Bob Dylan's kid too. He was in the Wallflowers.
Right. Yeah.
You know, there's lots of examples.
Yeah. So Peter Asher owned, or was part owner of the Indica Gallery, art gallery, which was off Duke Street in a place called Mason's Yard, in St James's, London.
Mason's Yard.
Mason's Yard, yeah.
Of course.
Now, apparently, I tried finding if it had a link to the Masons, but it was apparently a guy called Mason.
Okay.
But again, you don't know if that's real or.
Yeah, it's just funny.
Yeah, it's just funny. Yes, yeah.
You'd have to wonder about these art galleries as well in prime locations in central London. Little tiny art gallery like that. How does it?
It's probably money laundering.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. How does it turn it over?
Well, it was like a new agey book store as well, wasn't it? Yeah. Paul McCartney was meant to have bought books from there as well, and they stored the books in the basement.
I'm going to say what's in the basement.
Peter Asher, where Richard Asher was found. Sorry, all them years after, and he used to take some books out and then put some money in on top of the, on a note on the book saying he owed him some money, put it on his account. It sounds like he was one of the funders of this, but that's supposedly where John met Yoko Ono, isn't it?
On November 9th. I shit you not.
but again, the Ashers are involved in John getting into the peace movement and meeting Yoko Ono.
Yeah, Ono was his handler. This is talked about in memoirs. So right. Yeah. So their sister as well. They had a sister called Claire Asher, Jane and Peter, and she was also a radio actress and TV actress as well. So it's not just those guys. So I've got an interview as well, which is very interesting. Peter Asher talking. I'd say out of all the things that we're going to listen to, I'd say this is probably one of the most interesting ones because he sounds like he's been caught out a little bit here.
Well, there is one thing that I tried to ask you about. Well, it's not. I tried to ask you. Unfortunately, I've got the story I have is a bit garbled, and I tried to get in touch with the relevant guy, but he hasn't replied to my email, which is someone who was going out with. I don't know if it was a granddaughter of your mother's or if there's such a thing, but he said he was at your house and had to look after your mum one night, and she was quite old at the time, and she said that she'd helped Paul. Paul wanted to learn string arranging, and she'd helped him write string, and she had somewhere a handwritten sort of string chart for yesterday.
Oh,
which apparently she got out and showed him, and then it went
Who is this
into
person?
this wall of papers. It's called Andy Trudy.
No idea. Sorry,
Okay.
no, I don't know that.
I
name.
can't imagine he'd be a bit. Yeah,
But do you think?
no.
Did your mother ever give any help to Paul?
Yeah, but,
Yes.
but that's the idea of your mum helping
Yes,
him
she
to write
did.
string
Oh, she
arrangements
did.
is the key.
She helped him with what between her and George Martin, I suppose, at separate occasions. I mean, not together, but yeah, Paul was interested in orchestral music and orchestral instruments and what was what. I mean, and she did teach him some of that stuff, no question.
That's brilliant. And that's fantastic. Isn't that what a lovely thing?
Yes. So I don't know exactly. Having not been in either of those tutorials, what was George Martin and what was my mum, but I know she contributed, yes.
So is this just by coincidence that she taught George Martin?
Yes.
Where did she teach George?
This is widely written wrong. They keep saying, oh, my mother must have taught at the Guildhall because she taught George Martin and that's where he went. But it's actually more complicated if you care about how it exactly happened. He was at the Guildhall School of Music. When you were studying piano and composition, you had to take a second instrument, which you had to pass an exam on. He had chosen as his second instrument the oboe. He realized that he'd been giving his second instrument studies short shrift, and he was concerned that his oboe playing wasn't up to snuff and he wouldn't pass the exam. He looked for an independent oboe tutor who could give him private lessons. My mother was oboe professor at Royal Academy, which is, of course, a rival institution from the Guildhall. But she also gave private lessons. At the time, that would have been in our flat in Great Portland Street before we moved into Wimpole Street. So
amazing.
George would have come there and did come there for oboe lessons to get his oboe playing up to the level of his main instrument, piano.
But I heard McCartney tell a lovely story about how he actually just went and knocked on Bertrand Russell's door to ask him about the Vietnam War. And apparently he went in and they had a lovely chat.
I didn't know that. My father met Bertrand Russell.
Or a crock of shit.
Oh my God. The stories they tell, even the whole part about Paul being interested in orchestral arrangements and his mother would teach him or whatever, or show him. Well, by his own admittance, biological Paul could not read or write music. So can you imagine that session? She's sitting there writing stuff out, and he's like, I can't read.
Here you go, Gershwin.
So that's a bunch of nonsense, too. Now, if it was Billy, if he was referring to Billy, that would be a completely different story because Billy could read, write, pose, So, but it wasn't biological Paul.
I mean, quite a lot of questions arise from that conversation now, and it was only a snippet. It'd be nice to hear the full interview. Margaret Elliott apparently taught George. I've seen a conflicting 1946 and 1948. I mean, that's quite a long time that the Ashers were in that flat pre-Wimpole Street. They moved out of that in 1957. So there's no talk there. Follow-up question would have been, did George Martin stay in touch with the family from 1948, or how long was the lessons for? Were they for 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year? And were they friends afterwards, because it seems a bit coincidental, Peter, that Paul McCartney ended up living in your house and your mum had taught George Martin.
And he actually said it was a coincidence.
Yeah, it was quite an important question, that, weren't it? And he missed that question.
What's interesting is in memoirs, it talks about how George Martin was very high on McCartney's relationship with Jane Asher, that he was advocating and very supportive of Paul being in the relationship with Jane Asher. So that's interesting too, because why would a producer, your music producer, be whispering in your ear and telling you, I think it's a good idea that you stick around with Jane.
They generally want them single, don't they?
So it's a little weird. So that tells me that the relationship between George Martin and the Ashers was not just being taught how to play the oboe so that he can pass his class. There was a connection there, a very solid direct line connection.
And they haven't told about that connection. They haven't spoken about that connection. All right, maybe after the Ashes and stuff like that, after the 60s, but not up to the 60s, just had lessons and that were it, we're over.
Right.
And that can't be true. And the reason it can't be true is because Jane acted in I'm just going to jump over a little bit here. She acted in a film or a TV series called Robin Hood. And in that film, the famous song, that Robin Hood was produced by George Martin.
Okay.
Right. And her and Peter were in Robin Hood. I don't know if I've got a picture of them in Robin Hood, actually. Oh, there we go. They were actually in a couple of episodes of Robin Hood. So how did they get that gig? I would hazard a guess that the gig was got because they knew George Martin, possibly, and the wheels were greased, tracks were greased.
Yeah, I don't think again, we don't have any concrete proof, but from what I know and what you guys are presenting, Dom and Chris, there had to be a relationship where they were very familiar with each other. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, she was quite a famous actress as well with Jane Asher in the 60s. She was a well-known actress. She wasn't somebody who was unknown and just went out with Paul McCartney. I mean, she was in Alfie. She acted with Vincent Price in the Mask of Red Death. Interesting title. She was also in two Alice in Wonderland. portrayals of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. She also was in it again in 1985. Jane Asher.
Okay.
She played Mrs. Liddell in Dream Child, it was called. Interesting title. In 1985. That was written by Dennis Potter, Chris. Have you spoke about Dennis Potter before?
He's the English. He did that. Do you remember the one where they had a scarred face? It's an English author, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or TV writer, should I say?
Just nipping back to Jane Asher's husband, Gerald Scarfe, CBE. He was the guy that did the graphics for Pink Floyd's The Wall album. Yeah, and they had 3 kids: Katie, a stage and voice actress, TV and radio actress; Alexander, who's a writer, producer, actor; and Rory, who's a book editor. Those kids who she didn't want to go into acting.
Yeah,
just to cover that bit. Where were we? Yeah, so Alice Liddell. I find this guy a bit creepy. And I used to be into Alice in Wonderland. I quite like that story, to be honest with you. But now you know the information, I can't even think about it. But Jane Alice Liddell, and Lewis Carroll share several bloodlines back to Edward III. Jane Asher played Alice's mother, Mrs. Liddell, in the film Dreamland that I just mentioned. The relationship between the Liddells, Dodgson, broke in June 1863. And it's been speculated that by some biographers that Carroll / Dodgson may have wanted to marry the 11-year-old Alice Liddell.
Okay.
Lewis Carroll is cut from the same satanic Plantagenet bloodline that were mentioned earlier, and he shares several ancestors with Jane from the Percy family. Sir Henry Percy. Sir Henry Percy, 1364-1403, born at Alnwick Castle, we mentioned earlier, or Warkworth Castle. One of the Lord Warkworth was one of the head honchos of the United Lodge of England, if I remember right, left top of my head. Henry Percy, 2nd Earl of Northumberland, and Lady Elizabeth Percy, they're also related to her. And Carroll is also an ancestor of Lionel Plantagenet and Elizabeth de Burgh. Jane is also related to the de Burghs, and they're also ancestors of Chris de Burgh.
Okay. Well, this, again, I know we talked about this before, but Stacey's work tells us that Billy's mother is the Percy bloodline.
That's Elizabeth Percy, wasn't it, Mike?
Elizabeth Percy,
yeah.
And so now we're taking a look at Jane Asher, and she also is connected into the Percy bloodline.
Mm.
So this tells me, we're just taking a wild guess here, that Jane Asher knew exactly who Billy was, and vice versa. So, it's very, very weird in a way. But like we were saying earlier, they've got these bloodlines, and everything is kept within that circle.
Mm. Yeah. Interestingly, Julia Arnold and that's Julia and a younger sister sat down, Ethel Arnold. That's Aldous Huxley's mother is Julia Arnold, from the Arnold family. They've also got a famous American side. Their gene line goes back to Edward III through Thomas of Woodstock. Bear in mind that Aldous Huxley was probably the protagonist of the mescaline and LSD into the 60s. Woodstock is well known for
right,
that drug, isn't it?
Yep.
Interesting, isn't it? All these names keep coming up here.
That and the Summer of Love with the Monterey Pop Festival. Woodstock is, I equate Woodstock right up there with the Monterey Pop Festival.
Yeah. There were just some pictures I put together. Chris de Burgh, Lady in Red. I thought the song was written about Princess Diana, but Chris tells me it was written about de Burgh's wife. But anyway, but they're also related to Richard Branson as well, who likes dressing as women, likes dressing as air hostess. So he shares the de Burgh bloodline.
Virgin Airway.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and he shares a de Burgh bloodline, and he's got his boats and one of his planes called the Scarlet Lady. And one of the Scarlet Woman is obviously a Scarlet Woman isn't like a phrase, isn't it, used for a woman who's a bit loose, if you like.
Right.
Yeah, but Chris de Burgh is an Argentinian-born musician, a songwriter, and he's traced his family's tree back to Robert the Bruce, King of Scots. His maternal grandfather is Sir Eric de Bruce, a British Army officer who served as Chief of General Staff in India during World War II. And Colonel Charles John Davison is Chris's father, a British diplomat. But he just penned Lady in Red, Mike, and it were a big hit.
Yeah.
That was the only song he did, wasn't it, Dom?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
You know, you could pen that song, and if you didn't have the machine behind you, it would go absolutely nowhere.
As we say in England, that song was shite.
But it was massive, wasn't it? It was massive.
huge.
It was number one for ages.
Yeah. A proper wedding song, isn't it?
He was like he got under the cash cow because his voice was terrible as well.
Yeah. His great-grandfather was Lieutenant General Sir Edward Arthur Fanshawe. De Burgh descends through Robert de Bruce's second wife, Elizabeth de Burgh. Yeah. Asher de Burgh, Lady Di, all descend from Robert the Bruce. A Scottish king.
There you go.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to make this. You couldn't make this up if you wanted to write Game of Thrones around it.
See, that's the thing. You're going through this, Dom, and I'm thinking to myself, all these people that don't get this. No, this stuff is not true. You know, all these people aren't related. Everybody's related at some point. I'm thinking, come on.
Yeah.
Put your thinking cap on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's strange, isn't it, that the all of these people are related, and yet I can't believe that some of them don't say, "Oh, you're my cousin, by the way," you know, or you know, they might be at the Live Aid or something like that, and they can't all realise that they're all cousins, or you know, the set designer of the film isn't a cousin of such and such. It's just, yeah. We'll come on to this guy. This is Jane's maternal great-grandfather, and he's part of the Phillips family, or the Phillips family. It's spelt in different ways. He owned this property here, built by I think it was Sir Edward Phillips. It's called Montacute House. So, I mean, this is just a normal house. Most people live in these houses.
I'm going to say it's very similar to where we grew up, Dom.
Yeah.
I wonder who mows his lawn.
Yeah, I was going to say the lawn with a bucket on it.
Which army of gardeners mow his lawn? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Phillips family. I mean, Sir Edward Phillips, who's there, was the Master of Rolls and Chancellor to the son of James I, who was his heir, King Henry, became King Henry, the Prince of Wales. You know, these people working directly for the royal family. So Sir Edward Phillips, this is when we were listening to Sir Julian Huxley talk about the genes of these people, the pedigree, I think he said, this is the pedigree that they're looking for. That's why roll on 200 years' time, Jane Asher or Peter Asher's running Sony.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because that's the background that they've got. And he built that mansion there, Montacute House, which is still standing and now in the possession of the National Trust.
Oh, okay. So
Sir Edward died on, wait for it, 11th of September, 1614. Yeah. That place was built by Master Mason William Arnold. And we've come across that name before. I don't know if he's related to Aldous Huxley, whose mother was Julia Arnold, but I put some money on that he is personally, but knowing how the research goes. So the Phelps family were also married into the Bates family, and the Bates family owned Langley Castle and Iden Castle. So we're talking a depth here. We're not talking, oh, Mike's great granddad married somebody who was actually distant related to such and such, whatever. We're talking to people that owned castles here. You know, not just one, owned castles and massive stately homes. Yeah. And on a side note, an interesting side note, this guy who works at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology now owns one of them castles. He owns Langley Castle. And obviously the MITs, especially if you look into what he's doing, cybersecurity and stuff, is funded by DARPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always good to have DARPA on your side.
Oh, yeah. So this is also owned by the Phillips family. This is called Brimpton de Eversey House.
Yeah, I guess the word "small" wasn't in their vocabulary.
I mean, these are proper stately homes, aren't they?
Yes.
And those stately homes now in England, they're almost like money laundering operations, aren't they?
Well, part of the National Trust.
Yeah.
They apparently gave them away to the National Trust.
Yeah. A lot of them still live in them, you know.
Yeah.
In like one corner of the house.
Yeah. Sir Thomas Phillips of Silsand, 1445 to 1520, was esquire to the body of King Henry VII, who Jane's also related to, we'll come on to in a sec, and was appointed one of the stewards and receiver of the lordships. I'm not going to pronounce this Welsh name, Landstefan. I can pronounce that. So Henry VII is a great-grandfather of Jane Asher's, and the Phillips family, who's a distant great-great-great-grandfather, looked after the dead body of King Henry VII. Just a coincidence. If people are listening, I'm sure people who listen to your shows aren't like that, but you do get some odd comments, don't you? That people, oh, well, everybody's related to Charlemagne or wherever. Sorry, I'm not buying that one. Not in my research anyway.
Well, first of all, you can't just say that. You know, you have to be able to prove that. If you're going to say everybody's related to somebody, you have to be able to put forth the evidence and the proof. You know, you guys are going through the process of putting together your evidence and proof, but you know, people just shoot their mouths off and they type before thinking. So anyway,
so Sir Thomas Phillips was owner of Picton Castle, or it's called Silsand Castle, and he's a great grandfather of Sir John Phillips, first Baron of Picton Castle in 1560, who's also related, obviously, back to the Phillips family, who Jane's a distant relation of. That family also own Rock Castle. So I mean, these, you know, we've pointed out about 5 castles here. Last time we pointed out about 7 or 8 Masonic lodges named after her family. Now we're pointing out that there are castles that they owned within the family. You know, and people might not think that's important, but I think it's pretty important that they are part of the establishment. Because Jane Asher, when she was wheeled out in the 60s, was just this pretty young actress. Right. Nobody told you any of this information.
Well, look, a potato farmer didn't own that house.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So what it's talking to and what it's speaking to, for those that are, you know, kind of not there yet, is that this is the elite circle. This is part of the control system. And, you know, if you don't believe there's a control system, I don't know what to tell you, but there is. And what you're being shown here is that the control system's been in place for a long time. And people are connected to people who are, you know, the then part of the control system. And they brought forth the future people that would be part of the control system. So they keep it all in the family. And that's how the process works.
So the Viscount of St. David's, I found this interesting because we come back to music again. And this guy apparently is the latest Viscount, and he would be a cousin or a distant cousin probably of Jane Asher's, and he's the latest Viscount of St. David, and he is the Honourable Roland Augusto Yestin Estan Islao Phillips. He's going to be he's the youngest son of the third Viscount of St. David, and Augusta Victoria Correa. And he's quite an esteemed musician. He's the presumptive heir of the Viscounty, and he'll become the fifth Viscount. But they don't just inherit one title. They've got, some of these people have got several titles that they've married into. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 baronies, as well as the barony of that Picton Castle that we showed earlier. I showed it a minute ago. So
and he's related to the Ashers too?
Yes, he'll be a cousin of Jane Asher. And during the 2020 nonsense, he calls himself Roland Sharpeville, as opposed to him calling the Viscount of St. David. He assembled the world's first professional lockdown backing band, which included well-known session musicians, all living together under one roof in a rented Norfolk mansion. That's it there, Vowood, a Grade 2 listed hall. The James Bond film composer David Arnold, another Arnold, possibly related to Huxley, worked with Sharpeville on material forming part of a public awareness campaign designed to promote unity amongst the general public in 2020. Sharpeville and his band, a group of musicians, has worked with acts including Paul McCartney.
There you go.
These people don't just magnetize together by accident.
No,
because otherwise, I don't know how many words that are written down on this piece of paper or slides. You couldn't bring all this stuff together and say he's related to that and that, but they're all working together by accident.
Right, and then you have the whole COVID lockdown thing, and I'm assuming they were in all one home or residence.
Yes,
and it's just a bunch of nonsense. I mean, the whole thing is contrived.
Yes.
It just reeks of bullshit, if you ask me.
Yeah.
These are the stories they put out there. This is the propaganda that's put out there. Oh, we're all in one building and we're all playing together. We've got our masks on. Don't forget to put your mask on. I'm just so sick and tired of this stuff.
I know, it's boring, isn't it?
The stories, it is.
It hurts your head at times. It does hurt your head at times. But this is the tree back to Jane. King Henry VII was Jane's 16th great grandfather.
Okay.
So where are we here? The Francis Wolsey and John, the yellow line there. So these are connections I've picked, and they all have Masonic connections. So Earl Granville will be a principal guest at the 80 Club. So this is the 80 Club, and you'll see at the top of that line there, the Freemason. It must be a newspaper. These clubs, these are the secret clubs that they'll be having a glass of brandy and 100,000 people disappear in Africa at that point in 1887. Or going back to the making decisions based on things that we can't even think about and changing people's lives culturally at these clubs, aren't there? Anyway, Francis Wolsey's 53. There you go. Thomas Tyne, Viscount of Weymouth. This was the grand right. Earl Granville was married to Frances Wolsey, and she was the granddaughter of Thomas Tyne, first Viscount of Weymouth, whose son, Thomas Tyne, second Viscount of Weymouth, was the Grand Master of the Premier Grand Lodge of England. And there's his name there. And this would be a distant, if we look back here, there we go, Earl Granville, Frances Wolsey. Her father was the guy that was the Grand Master. So, and I know the distant links, but they're all more. Anyway, the Viscount Weymouth constructed the Serpentine Lake at Longleat on his Longleat estate, and that's the Longleat estate. I mean, everybody just builds the Serpentine Lake, don't they, Mike, in the back garden? But they all link into the Earls of Sunderland, back into that area where the Earls of Northumberland, the Percys are. They're all intertwined in that same area. And they're also married into the Spencer family of Woodstock. Again, there's that name. Who have their own lodge, because the Spencers were the Dukes of Marlborough and they had the Marlborough Lodge.
It says the Spencer Churchill family tree.
Yes, yeah. So also they're related to Princess Diana as well. The Spencers, the Earl of Spencer was was Princess Diana's brother.
Does that tie into Winston Churchill?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Just a wild guess on my part.
Yeah. So Diana's royal lineages includes 2 illegitimate children of King Charles II. So Princess Diana was related twice back to King Charles through Henry Fitzroy and Charles Lennox. We mentioned the Lennox family before. And anyway. So just to finish off, this is what sort of got me started, to be honest with you. Jane Asher is related to King Edward III. She's also got royal Welsh royalty, or ancient royal Welsh royalty. And so is John Lennon. So is Eminem. So is John Densmore. I mentioned earlier that Eminem, his great-great-grandfather, Increase Mathers, was the guy that brought the law in to burn people at the stake. Well, John Densmore, the drummer of The Doors, he had a great-grandmother burnt at the stake in Salem. Quay also has all this Welsh royal lineage as well, as does the Bush family, and loads of other people go through this ancient Welsh royal lineage. But the first thing that I noticed for Jane that got me really interested was this, the Kingdom of the Isles, and I mentioned it right at the end of the first presentation. So she's related to the ancient kings of Scotland, but the ancient Viking kings of Scotland, and her bloodline is, there's no doubt, but it sort of blew me away, this, because the Elliot bloodline is related, no question, to the ancient Viscounts of Dillon, known as De Leon or De Leon. We take it back to Sir Henry de Leon in 1185, and he accompanied Prince, later King John, to Ireland and acquired extensive land grants in the counties of Longford and Westmeath. Eventually, these lands were called Dillon's County and divided into the barony of Kilkenny West and others in 1543. And the name Dillon comes from the French name de Lion. And Henry de Lion married the daughter of Sir John de Courcy and Africa de Courcy. This is that lady here. Now, Africa de Courcy, although it sounds quite exotic, she's actually the daughter of Godred Olafson, King of the Isles, King of the Scottish Isles. This guy. And he ruled over this area here. Kintyre.
Oh, okay.
And all these areas here, all the yellow and pink areas, he ruled over. The area where Linda McCartney's Memorial Garden is.
And of course, Billy had the song, The Mull of Kintyre.
Yeah. And this is what excited me. When I emailed this over to Mark and Matt in December, I couldn't believe what I'd found. And going back to the laws of coincidence, this is off the charts if you think it's coincidence. It can't be coincidence. Also, in that area is an island called Sodor. And anybody with grandchildren who listen to Thomas the Tank Engine will know that, or children who listen to Thomas the Tank Engine will know there's a mythical island there called Sodor. And Ringo Starr did the voiceover for
I was going to say, yeah, Ringo, yeah.
And that brings us to the end of part 2.
This was excellent, Dom and Chris.
I didn't say much, Mike, to be fair. Rod Dom's the research that.
That was excellent, Dom.
In fairness, Chris, we're having some audio problems as well, weren't you, Chris?
So, no, that's okay. It happens.
Speak in case I bodged it up.
Yeah,
yeah, it happens. It happens.
But in case people are thinking, all this research in 1960s, where is it now? Where is this? You know, voices under your pillow and things like that. Where does it lead to? And this last video I'm going to play is a professor called James Giordano, and he's not on our side at all. He works for DARPA, and he was doing the rounds in 2017. And he's going to tell us how they do it now. They've moved it on a long way.
Moreover, we can induce a number of neuromicrobiological agents to then incur something called high morbidity. These are not necessarily mortal agents. We can modify the existing palette of bacteria and viruses through the use of gene editing techniques. Very viable. This has been some of my ongoing work with my colleague Diane Diulis at National Defense University. And what we can also do is recognize that there are existing microbiologicals that can be harnessed to then induce the effects. We can also engage certain chemicals that way. What we want here is a morbidity factor, not necessarily a mortality factor. I want to make people sick. And what I do here is the virus is not necessarily the bug. The virus is what I put over the internet. Let me show you how I can crash a system pretty easily. I affect key individuals here, here, and here. And then I take another community in the back of the room. I affect key individuals there. And then I take another community. I affect key individuals there. And then I do what every good attributional group does. I beat my chest and take credit for it. And what I put out over the internet is, this is a virus, a bacteria, an agent that I have infiltrated into your fill in the blank. I say it's a weapon of mass destruction. And what I tell you it's going to do is it's going to produce paranoia, anxiety, and sleeplessness. What I've just done is I've recruited every paranoid hypochondriac to think that they have whatever that is. I've used salient and sentinel cases, and I create essentially a legion of what's known as the worried well.
He actually said the worried well there at the end of that. That's basically banging pots and pans on the doorsteps in 2020.
Right. That's right.
That's Beatle possession on a scale that's bigger than a Beatle performance at a stadium in 1960s.
Yep. You know what's interesting, guys, is I put a post up on my community tab on my Beatles YouTube channel. And it was an article that had to do with Yoko Ono's daughter, Kyoko. And I'm not kidding, that's her name. It's Yoko with a K, Kyoko. And to make a long story short, Yoko Ono's first husband, prior to John, took their daughter and he split with her. And she wound up in a cult. And then later on, John and Yoko were trying to reconnect with her. And eventually they did reconnect with her. And what she had said was that when she got back and she was interacting with John and Yoko, she said that the Beatles were a cult. She was talking about, this is a person that came from a cult, that then realized that she was in a cult, got out of the cult, reconnected with her mother and, you know, with John Lennon. And after spending time and understanding what the Beatles were all about, she said they were a cult, or they are a cult. So this is kind of interesting, right? Where a person who was in a cult says that that's a cult too.
Yes.
Yeah. So it goes to the point where, you know, they can create these things and these environments and all, like he said, worry, stress, anxiousness, and preoccupy people's minds with this stuff. And when you're preoccupied with this crap, you're not thinking in a positive way. You're not doing positive things in your life. You're worried and you're trying to, you think, oh, I have to survive, you know, and you're in survival mode. But anyway, I just thought I would throw that story out there because when I was watching this, I thought of Kyoko.
Well, it all fits. It was interesting to say he affects people or affect him. When I listened to it the first time, I thought he said infect, but he said affect. He didn't. It made it sound like that. He was going to say infect, but he said affect.
Right.
That's totally different. That I can crash a computer and affect it. Just like what William Sargent was trying to do with his voodoo experimentations. They've made it electronic now. Digital.
Yes. And he was referring to it, he was talking in terms of a virus.
Yes.
So when I was listening to that, what he's basically saying is this is a virus too. It's a mind parasite that we're going to put into your head, and we're going to affect how you think, how you behave, how you react.
Yeah. Because we can tune into that frequency that turns it on.
Right.
Basically, that's what I thought it was saying. We could tune into the frequency that turns that part on. It might not affect everybody. It'll affect you, and you. But we know if we press that button, out of 100,000 people, a certain percentage of that dynamic of that demographic is going to be either, I don't know, sent mad
or under control, under the
control,
control that they want them to be under. So it's very sophisticated. They've been at this a very, very, very long time. So
very dark as well.
It's very dark, and I don't know. I mean, a lot of times I feel like I'm on the outside looking in, because when you understand this stuff to the degree that we understand it, I'm not saying I understand everything, but I know enough to know that what's going on and what they're doing. And when you're on the outside looking in, it's like looking out your window and watching what's going on down at street level. It's incredible. It's incredible to see how so many people cannot pierce the veil. They just can't open the curtain and look behind it.